1, 2, 3.
38 seconds. That's how long the studio audience laughed after Sammy Davis Jr. planted a kiss on Archie Bunker's cheek during a 1972 episode of All in the Family. 38 seconds of pure, uncontrollable laughter. The director called it the biggest, longest laugh he had ever experienced in his entire career. And here's the thing. That moment only worked because by season 2, audiences had watched Carroll O'Connor transform Archie Bunker from a controversial, satirical device into something far more complicated. A character you could simultaneously cringe at and care about. The comedy had evolved. The character had deepened. And that kiss landed because viewers had taken the journey with him. Today, we're counting down 12 sitcom dads from the golden age of network television who didn't just get funnier as their shows went on. They became comedic forces their creators never imagined. These are characters who started as one thing and became something else entirely. Shaped by brilliant actors, live studio audiences, and writers who learned to lean into what was working. If you grew up watching any of these shows, you're about to feel very nostalgic. And if you're new here, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe before we dive in. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Let's get into it. Number 12, Alan Matthews from Boy Meets World.
You brought Sean down, thanks. Now why don't you just take a hike back to Conland?
Now, do you see how judgmental these people
No,
are?
listen.
We're starting with a dad who doesn't get nearly enough credit for holding an entire show together while chaos erupted around him. William Russ played Alan Matthews on ABC's Boy Meets World from 1993 to 2000. 7 seasons and 158 episodes of watching his fictional sons make increasingly questionable life decisions. Russ appeared in 130 of those episodes, which means he was there for almost everything. Now here's what made Alan Matthews funnier over time: his eldest son, Eric. In early seasons, Eric was the cool older brother. But as the show progressed through seasons 5, 6, and 7, Eric transformed into an increasingly irrational man-child who would say things like, "Duckies are the horsies of the ocean." And Alan's comedy evolved in direct response. His deadpan reactions became the grounded counterpoint to the absurdity. Where Eric spiraled, Alan just stared. The less he said, the funnier it got. What people forget is that William Russ wasn't a sitcom guy. This was a serious stage actor who had appeared in The Right Stuff in 1983 and would go on to American History X in 1998. He brought dramatic chops to a Friday night sitcom, and somehow that made the comedy land even harder. Number 11, Carl Winslow from Family Matters.
Well, look who's up at the crack of noon.
Speaking of dads whose shows changed around them, nobody experienced a more dramatic transformation than Reginald VelJohnson's Carl Winslow. Family Matters ran on ABC and later CBS from 1989 to 1998. 9 seasons and 215 episodes. VelJohnson came into the show fresh off Die Hard, cast as the patriarch of a Chicago family in what started as a Perfect Strangers spinoff. Then, midway through season 1, a character named Steve Urkel showed up for what was supposed to be a single episode. You know what happened next. The nerdy neighbor with the suspenders and the nasally voice absolutely detonated, and Carl Winslow evolved from protagonist to reactor. His entire comedic function shifted to exasperated responses. That line he had lived, "Go home, go home, go home," became his signature, because it was essentially the only thing the writers let him do anymore. VelJohnson himself called it the onslaught of the Urkel character, who kind of usurped everything else. But he also admitted that without Steve Urkel, the show probably wouldn't have achieved what it did. Family Matters won its Friday night time slot for approximately 8 consecutive years. The show's tonal shift is one of the most jarring in television history. It went from grounded family comedy to a show featuring cloning machines, transformation chambers, and a trip to actual space. And through all of it, Carl Winslow was there. reacting, sighing, and somehow getting funnier in his frustration. Number 10. Danny Tanner from Full House.
Dad, Stephanie's gonna go nuts!
I know. Am I the baddest dad a kid ever had?
Here's a comedic paradox for you. Bob Saget, the man who delivered what many consider the most disturbing segment in the documentary The Aristocrats, spent 8 years playing the most wholesome father in television history. Full House ran on ABC from 1987 to 1995. 192 episodes of Danny Tanner teaching life lessons, cleaning obsessively, and doing everything in his power to raise 3 daughters after his wife's death. The show ranked 71st in its first season. Not exactly a runaway hit, but by seasons 5 and 6, Full House had climbed into the top 10, and Danny Tanner's comedy had evolved considerably. In early episodes, Danny was mostly the straight man. As the show progressed, his cleaning obsession became more pronounced. His dad jokes got cornier, and his attempts to seem hip got more desperately out of touch. The comedy came from his sincerity. This was a man who genuinely believed that clean is good and dirt is bad was wisdom worth passing down. Creator Jeff Franklin saw something specific during what he called a secret chemistry test. There were just a couple of moments where Saget had this spark that made him right for the role. Saget was always honest about the tension. He was a dirty comic before Danny Tanner and stayed one after. But somehow, that contrast made the character work. You were watching a man constantly at war with his own instincts, and that's inherently funny. Number 9. Tim Taylor from Home Improvement.
To me, it's the effort you put into things, not just the grade that counts.
So it's okay if I flunk?
No.
If you were alive in the 1990s, you heard the grunt. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Tim Allen's Tim Taylor ran on ABC from 1991 to 1999. 8 seasons and 204 episodes of a man who believed every problem could be solved with more power. Home Improvement was the only major 90s sitcom to stay in the Nielsen Top 10 for its entire run, every single season. Here's what people forget. Tim Allen had never acted before this show. He was a stand-up comedian whose 1990 Showtime special Men Are Pigs had caught Disney executives' attention. The premise was that men were essentially evolved apes who communicate through grunting. Sound familiar? Rock legend Bob Seger gave Allen some advice early in his career. Develop a hook, something that people remember. That grunt became exactly that. As the show progressed, Tim Taylor's disasters got bigger. His relationship with his neighbor Wilson got deeper, and his moments of genuine vulnerability made the comedy land harder. His co-star Patricia Richardson pointed out that people don't give Tim enough credit for the acting he was doing. He had never acted before and was getting acting lessons on the side. In 1994, Tim Allen achieved something unprecedented. He simultaneously held the #1 movie with the Santa Claus, the #1 book with Don't Stand Too Close to a Naked Man, and the top-rated television series. The network offered him $50 million for a 9th season. He said no. By 1996, the show's syndication had generated over $500 million. Not bad for a guy whose entire comedic theory started with grunt noises. Number 8. Dan Connor from Roseanne.
Forget about it. He's just being lazy. Don't worry about it. From now on, he'll be hitting the books, or the books will be hitting him.
John Goodman walked onto the set of Roseanne having been discovered while performing Antony and Cleopatra in Los Angeles. He was a classically trained theater actor with imposing physical presence who somehow ended up playing second fiddle to one of the sharpest comedic voices in television. The show ran on ABC from 1988 to 1997. 9 seasons and 222 episodes. And here's the thing about Dan Connor. He started as the straight man to Roseanne Barr's razor-tongued matriarch. But over time, writers figured out what they had in Goodman. His deadpan delivery was devastating. His improvisational instincts were sharp. And his ability to pivot from broad physical comedy to genuine emotion within a single scene made him indispensable to the show's success. Roseanne was the #1 show in America during its second season in 1989 and 1990, and it stayed in the top 5 for 6 consecutive years. Critics called Dan the emotional anchor of the series, comparing the Connor marriage to the Bunkers on All in the Family. Dan's love for his wife showed viewers that Roseanne could be lovable despite her abrasiveness. Goodman earned 7 consecutive Emmy nominations for Outstanding Lead Actor in a comedy series from 1989 to 1995. He never won for the role, but he did take home a Golden Globe in 1993. The show's 9th season is legendary for all the wrong reasons. The Connors win the lottery, which destroyed everything authentic about the show's working-class roots. The finale revealed Dan had actually died of a heart attack, and the entire final season was fiction Roseanne had written to cope. When the 2018 revival retconned the death, Dan got one of the show's best jokes. Roseanne's book would have been more successful if she hadn't killed off the most interesting character. Number 7. Hank Hill from King of the Hill.
Okay, let's clear the air. What I did to the governor with my bottom was wrong.
Now we're moving into animation, and I want to start with the dad who proved you could be funny without being absurd. Mike Judge co-created King of the Hill with Greg Daniels, who would later bring us The Office and Parks and Recreation. The show ran on Fox from 1997 to 2009. 13 seasons and 259 episodes of propane and propane accessories. Hank Hill was animated, but played like live action. This was understated, observational comedy built around a propane salesman's pained Boy Scout rectitude. Where other animated dads went bigger and broader over time, Hank's humor intensified through specificity, the propane devotion, the narrow urethra, the way he'd say, "I tell you what." Critics captured it perfectly. Mike Judge made Hank Hill funny in his pained rectitude without making him a figure of fun for it. You laughed with Hank, not at him. Season 2 peaked at over 16 million average viewers, which actually outperformed The Simpsons. And Judge watched Hank grow through the series in ways that weren't originally planned. The character wasn't supposed to embrace his son Bobby the way he eventually did, but the evolution happened naturally. The show was revived on Hulu in August 2025, and here's the remarkable part. That revival earned a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been renewed through season 17. Hank Hill is still funny, still selling propane, and still proving that quiet comedy has staying power. Number 6. Homer Simpson from The Simpsons.
What is it?
We have to talk about Homer. We have to talk about the most documented comedic evolution and devolution of any sitcom dad in history. The Simpsons debuted on Fox on December 17, 1989, and as of early 2026, has aired over 805 episodes. It's been renewed through season 40. This show has been on the air longer than some of you have been alive. Homer's voice itself evolved. Dan Castellaneta started with a loose impression of Walter Matthau during the Tracy Ullman Show shorts, but he couldn't sustain that gruff tone during marathon recording sessions. By season 2, he dropped the voice down into something more versatile, partly based on his own father. Here's the trajectory. In seasons 1 and 2, Bart drove the show. Bartmania sold 1 million t-shirts per day. Entertainment Weekly named Bart Entertainer of the Year in 1990. But by season 3, the focus shifted. As creator Matt Groening explained, with Homer, there's just a wider range of jokes you can do. And there are far more drastic consequences to Homer's stupidity. The Golden Age, roughly seasons 3 through 8, gave us Homer at his richest, boorish, lazy, quick-tempered, but animated by unshakable love for his family. Then came what fans call the jerk-ass Homer era, starting around season 9. Homer's selfishness began to overwhelm his humanity. The lovable oaf became genuinely cruel at times. critics pointed to new showrunner Mike Scully's tenure as the turning point. Under Scully, The Simpsons became, well, a cartoon, prioritizing shock over heart. But the numbers are undeniable. Homer's catchphrase entered the Oxford English Dictionary in 2001. Dan Castellaneta won 4 Primetime Emmys for voice-over performance. The show's 2013 syndication deal with FXX was worth $750 million, the biggest off-network deal in television history. And the term Flanderization itself? It comes from this show's Ned Flanders, who devolved from a kind neighbor into a one-dimensional evangelical caricature. Homer is both the example of getting funnier and the cautionary tale of going too far. Number 5. Red Forman from That 70s Show.
If the U.S. government decides to stick a tracking device up your ass, you say thank you.
If I say dumbass in a very specific tone of voice, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Kurtwood Smith played Red Forman on Fox's That 70s Show from 1998 to 2006. In 8 seasons and 200 episodes of threatening to put his foot in various places. Before this, Smith was best known as terrifying villain Clarence Boddicker in RoboCop. He also played the stern father in Dead Poets Society. He channeled that menace directly into comedy, and it worked brilliantly. Red's catchphrases didn't just develop, they became the show's identity. The word dumbass evolved from occasional stern father moments into the most reliable comedy the show had. And those endlessly creative foot threats got more elaborate over time. You are about to read a book that my foot wrote. It's called On the Road to In Your Ass. The showrunner said it best. When you give actors like Kurtwood Smith material, they add subtlety and elevate it and find laughs you didn't even know existed. Smith himself acknowledged how much the show changed from beginning to end. Here's the injustice. Despite being widely considered the comedic MVP of That 70s Show, Kurtwood Smith never received an individual Emmy nomination. Not one. It's one of the era's most notable oversights. The show's syndication deal reached $1.8 million per episode, and syndication ratings actually grew 3% in their second year. Red Forman was funny enough to make people come back for more. Number 4. Al Bundy from Married with Children.
Is this your little cactus?
Uh-huh.
Any particular reason you put it where the alarm clock used to be?
Let's talk about a man whose entire comedic existence was built on cosmic defeat. Ed O'Neill's Al Bundy appeared on Fox from 1987 to 1997. 11 seasons and 259 episodes, making it Fox's longest-running live-action sitcom. The creators explicitly conceived the show as not the Cosbys, and Fox executives told them to be as outrageous as they could be. O'Neill was a serious theater actor from the American Repertory Theater who had been cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers during 1969 training camp. He based Al on his Uncle Joe, just a self-deprecating guy who would come home from work to hear his wife say she ran over the dog, and he'd just respond, "Fine, what's for dinner?" The 4 touchdowns at Polk High, the hand down the pants, the no ma'am meetings. These accumulated over seasons as writers leaned into O'Neill's physicality. The creators knew immediately after his audition. As far as they were concerned, he didn't have to say another word. That was Al Bundy. The episode It's a Bundyful Life in Season 4 drew over 31 million viewers. And here's a beautiful irony. Activist Terry Rakolta launched a boycott campaign against the show in 1989, which paradoxically drove ratings even higher. O'Neill earned 2 Golden Globe nominations in 1992 and 1993, but the show never won a single Emmy despite 7 nominations. A remarkable shutout for such a cultural phenomenon. Number 3. Frank Costanza from Seinfeld.
When my blood pressure gets too high, the man on the tape tells me to say, "Serenity now!"
Are you supposed to yell it?
This one is special because Frank Costanza wasn't supposed to exist in the form we know him. The character first appeared in Season 4 of Seinfeld played by a different actor, John Randolph, as a subdued, passive figure. Larry David wanted Jerry Stiller from the start, but Stiller turned it down because he hadn't heard of the show. When Stiller finally took over in season 5, Frank Costanza absolutely detonated. Stiller found that the meek version wasn't working and asked David if he could perform differently. When he started screaming his lines, Larry David said simply, "Jerry, keep it that way. Here's the secret nobody talks about." Jason Alexander explained that a lot of the Frank Costanza character came from Jerry Stiller's genuine anxiety about memorizing lines. What audiences saw was his growing frustration with his own memory, translated into disdain for the entire world. Jerry Seinfeld's assessment was emphatic. They never gave Jerry Stiller a note. Not once. He never adjusted his performance. Whatever Stiller did, that was it. Across approximately 29 episodes, Stiller created Festivus and that immortal line about having a lot of problems with you people. He created Serenity Now, bellowed rather than calmly stated, which was the whole joke. He created the debate over what to call a male brassiere. He created the Marble Rye heist. Writers learned to build entire episodes around his explosive energy. Ben Stiller noted that his father never once raised his voice to him as a child. Not ever. Frank Costanza was an unleashing of something suppressed in his real life. Stiller earned an Emmy nomination in 1997 and an American Comedy Award in 1998 for a character who appeared in less than 30 episodes of a 180-episode series. That's how much impact he had. Number 2. George Jefferson from the Jeffersons.
I'll give you $20 if you do a good job.
$20?
Right.
Look, Mr. Jefferson, keep your $20. This one's on me.
Before we get to number 1, we need to talk about the man who invented the sitcom Dad Strut. Sherman Hemsley's George Jefferson first appeared on All in the Family in 1973, designed as Archie Bunker's black counterpart. Norman Lear wanted Hemsley specifically, but Hemsley was performing in Purlie on Broadway. Lear waited 2 full years for him to finish that run before bringing him on. The Jeffersons spun off onto CBS in January 1975 and ran for 11 seasons, 253 episodes through 1985. At the time of its cancellation, it was the longest-running broadcast series with black leads in television history. George was equally opinionated, rude, and bigoted as Archie, just with different targets. But he was also a self-made success story, whose dry cleaning empire propelled his family from Queens to a Manhattan penthouse. Hemsley created the iconic George Jefferson strut entirely himself. NPR recalled how that strut became a dance in neighborhoods across America. People actually learned to walk like George Jefferson because this guy was so powerful and compelling. Here's what made Hemsley special. He was intensely private and shy in real life. He acknowledged that all of it was hard because he didn't like to be rude, but it was the character, and he had to be true to it. George's comedy escalated over 11 seasons. The bluster grew broader. The schemes grew more outlandish. The celebrity cameos multiplied. The show raised the same question that haunted Archie. Were audiences laughing with George or at him? CBS canceled the show abruptly without informing the cast. They learned from tabloids. No proper finale. No goodbye. But Sherman Hemsley had already secured his legacy as one of the funniest sitcom dads in television history. Number 1. Archie Bunker from All in the Family.
So hungry.
I hope you got a spare uniform, because in a minute I'm gonna vomit on you.
We're back where we started, with that 38 seconds of laughter. Carroll O'Connor's Archie Bunker debuted on CBS on January 12, 1971. The network ran a disclaimer before early episodes. The premiere drew only a 15% audience share. A Life magazine critic called it a wretched program. Then, America decided it couldn't stop watching. All in the Family hit number 1 in Nielsen ratings for 5 consecutive seasons. From 1971 through 1976, it drew roughly 50 million weekly viewers at its peak. Only 2 other programs in television history have achieved that streak. O'Connor was a liberal Irish-American character actor who had been living in Rome and requested a return airline ticket as a condition of accepting the role. He brought humanity to Archie's bigotry that transformed the character from satirical device into America's most complicated father. Norman Lear saw it immediately in the audition. The minute Carroll O'Connor read those lines, that's who Archie Bunker was. There was no separation between actor and character. O'Connor's own description of Archie's dilemma was precise. The character was coping with a world changing in front of him. He didn't know what to do except to lose his temper, mouth his poisons, and look elsewhere to fix the blame for his own discomfort. As seasons progressed, Archie evolved. He expressed revulsion at a group resembling the KKK that he accidentally joins. He formed grudging cross-racial friendships. He grieved Edith's death in the Peabody Award-winning episode called Archie Alone. The comedy deepened because the character deepened. O'Connor won 4 Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. Conclusion. So what do all 12 of these dads have in common? They weren't originally conceived as the funniest characters on their shows. Carroll O'Connor was supposed to be a satirical target. John Goodman was supposed to be the straight man. Jerry Stiller was supposed to be subdued. Ed O'Neill was supposed to be pathetic. Dan Castellaneta was supposed to sound like Walter Matthau. But something happened over hundreds of episodes and countless hours of live audience feedback. These actors discovered truths the writers hadn't scripted. Jerry Stiller's anxiety about memorizing lines became Frank Costanza's rage. Ed O'Neill's physical resignation became Al Bundy's existential defeat. Carroll O'Connor's intelligence made Archie's bigotry readable as pain instead of pure malice. The structural conditions of television before the year 2000, with 22 to 26 episodes per season, multi-camera formats with live studio audiences, and syndication thresholds requiring around 100 episodes, created laboratories for character comedy. If a catchphrase got a laugh, writers leaned in harder next week. If a physical mannerism worked, it became a signature. The same forces also produced flanderization. Characters reduced to their most reproducible traits. Carl Winslow became an Urkel reactor. Homer Simpson's lovable dimness sometimes curdled into cruelty. The lottery ruined the Connors, but the best performances transcended the format's limitations. And that's why we're still talking about these characters decades later. When Red Forman threatens to put his foot somewhere, when Homer says his catchphrase, when Archie calls someone a dingbat, those moments carry the accumulated weight of hundreds of hours of shared time. These sitcom dads didn't just develop catchphrases. They developed relationships with audiences so deep that a raised eyebrow or a signature slouch could absolutely destroy a room. That kind of comedy takes years to build. And it's why these 12 dads remain, decades later, the funniest fathers television has ever produced. If you made it this far, you're clearly a person of excellent taste. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment letting me know which sitcom dad was your favorite growing up.